These are without a doubt the easiest elite specializations to play in Guild Wars 2. Now I'm going to be taking a look at each of the core professions and what elite specialization that they have, and basically what is the most brain dead. It doesn't really take much effort and you win. Now, of course, if we look at the entirety of the profession, typically the core profession is the least intensive and tends to be easier, but we're going to be focusing on those fancy elite specializations, what everyone likes to hear about. Before we go any further, this is my opinion, as ease of use for each profession and each elite specialization is vastly different between everyone, and in my experience, these are the easiest elite specializations that I've been able to pick up and play and not really have to pull my hair out. So anyway, here we go. So starting out with the warrior, the elite specialization that is the easiest to play is the Berserker. And the reason that I chose the Berserker is because it really doesn't change the core aspect of the warrior, its basic, we'll say, profession mechanic, dramatically. However, you're able to just pick up this extra boost of damage and essentially go hog wild. You see the bright flashy buttons and you just start smashing away, and essentially you can keep your rage bar and your adrenaline flowing and essentially keep that berserk mode for as long as you need to. And typically I see more power oriented builds around the Berserker, and honestly, just being able to pick up and play, it has a lot of great sustain, has a lot of great damage. It doesn't really take as much damage as you would really think, so all around it's just a good pick. Moving on to the Guardian, this one was actually quite simple. The easiest elite specialization for the Guardian is the Dragon Hunter, and I don't really think that that comes as much a surprise. The idea of picking up a longbow and being able to pepper enemies from a great distance, and then once they get close, they just get sucked into the void that is your traps. I mean, it really just takes a very simplistic route of, I'm going to harry you from a great distance until you get close, and then I'm going to trap you in all of my little deadly circles. And then if you get even closer and I don't want you to be there, I can jump away with my resolve. So it's one of those things that it has its own built-in protection, it has its own built-in control. However, it really doesn't take away too much from the damage. You can essentially go full tilt and run full berserkers with the strike damage and all that with a longbow, and you never really even have to swap weapons. You could just sit there and just keep striking and have no problem. Now for the Revenant's easiest elite specialization, I actually went ahead and went with the Renegade. And the reason that I went with the Renegade is because, one, it does have range, which is always a fantastic choice for ease of use. That gives you more control and more space. It doesn't thrust you straight into melee. However, in comparison to, in my opinion, its next nearest, we'll say, competitor, which was the Herald, you really have to pay attention to how you are managing your energy. With the Renegade, essentially, I found ease of use just spamming your abilities. Now, granted, Revenant and the Renegade, I haven't spent as much time as other professions playing it, so I won't sit there and say that I know all the ins and outs of it. However, it does seem very straightforward. You just keep attacking, you summon the warband, and, you go to town, and you swap when you need to. And honestly, for the most part, most enemies were dead before I needed to even swap anyway. So it was just a very simplistic, very straightforward gameplay, and you kept it range, which is always just a nice ease of use, we'll say. Next, for the Ranger, I chose the Soul Beast out of the elite specialization choices for the core Ranger. And the reason being is that the Druid and their celestial avatar state changes how the gameplay goes, and I felt like it was a little bit too complex in that sense. Whereas the Soul Beast, it just keeps your core, we'll say, weapon skills and everything that you have. It has these new stances that you can add, but you can also meld with your pet. One of the issues that I've found, especially playing with my Ranger or any, we'll say, profession that has some type of pet, is the wonky AI. Sometimes it takes a while for my pet to actually come to me and then attack where I need it to attack. Whereas with the Soul Beast, essentially you can just meld together and then you're good to go. You have all the damage components and the buff from your pet, and you get some of their abilities, and you don't have to worry about where your pet is, allowing you to just keep hammering away and keep doing your thing. I found that to be a very simplistic and straightforward approach for, we'll say, for most part of open world and some of the shenanigans that I got into. But honestly, the Untamed would probably be the next nearest competitor, and that is also kind of a, we'll say, on the same page as the Druid, as the Untamed has the Unleash abilities, but you also have to make sure that you're timing the correct Unleash Ambush abilities, as well as maintaining that, we'll say, that balance back and forth on top of your already, weapon swapping and everything like that. So there's a lot more picking and choosing as far as order is concerned. For the Thief, there really wasn't too much of a question here. Honestly, in my opinion, the easiest elite specialization for the Thief is, of course, the Deadeye. And I don't really expect too many people to really say, no, the Daredevil's easy. You could argue the Spectre, I would say. But the Deadeye essentially is just able to keep enemies at a crazy long range, and then given all the mobility and stealth that the Thief already brought to the table, now add a long rifle to be able to pepper enemies from a crazy distance, essentially stealth into one of their final judgments, and then just obliterate enemies at like a crazy long distance while they're just chasing shadows. The Deadeye really just personifies that ease of use. I'm going to hit you from a crazy distance and you can't do a damn thing about it. Now, for the Engineer, there's absolutely no question, and there is no debate about what is the easiest profession or the easiest elite specialization for the Engineer, and that is, of course, the Mechanist. You get a giant green robot that all they do is just decimate everything that they touch, while all the while you are at great distance shooting away with your rifle or your pistols, or you can even be up close with the mace and the shield. But honestly, the amount of damage that your pet can do, that your mech can do, all the while keeping you relatively safe, and that's not even talking about the pet's supportive capabilities and being able to heal, as well as offer alacrity, amongst other things. There's so much that the Mechanist can do, and it's so simple. For the most part, you don't even have to include any type of weapon kits, which is kind of like the thing for the Engineer. You have some type of weapon kit that you jump into, you utilize, and then you jump back out. They can't swap weapons in combat, however, they do use these weapon kits. So it's an interesting take to really just have this simplistic mindset for this previously really intensive class. So easy mode, Mechanist is the way. All right, so for the Necromancer, there was a little bit of debate. However, I ended up leaning more towards the Reaper as far as the easiest elite specialization for that particular profession. And the reason being is that the Reaper just absolutely cooks. It deals so much damage right now. Not only are we talking that it brings its own life steal to the table, but their auto attacks in Reaper Shroud are hitting for like 3,500 to 4,000. Just your normal cycling attacks, which is incredible. Now, the opposite, of course, is the Harbinger. The Harbinger was pretty close in that debate as well, and not only including that they essentially have a full range kit and utilize the pistol and able to shoot at a distance. The only problem is that the Harbinger Shroud doesn't act as a secondary health, we'll say, bar, whereas the Reaper Shroud essentially offers that extra defensive while also being offensive. And then again, it's just really cool. You get to play as a Reaper, you go into Reaper Shroud and you just start obliterating foes, you jump out, you smack people with your greatsword. I mean, it's a lot of fun, and then you scream at them the whole time. You can't go wrong with this. For the Mesmer, honestly, the easiest elite specialization is going to be the Virtuoso. The Virtuoso is, without a doubt, one of the simplest, most effective, we'll say, elite specializations in the game. Not only does it take all of your clones and your phantasms and essentially removes them in favor of the stocked blades, you won't ever really have to worry about the AI of where these guys are and where they're running. Are they close enough to the enemy that they can actually get their shatter abilities off? Essentially, you just use your Blade Song Sorrow and your Blade Storm, and you just start throwing all these mental blades at the people, and you're good to go. You're cooking. You don't have to worry about any of the intricacies of managing where your clones or your phantasms are. And then on top of that, you deal a ton of damage just using the dagger main hand. So even if that's all you have, you're still cooking with the amount of damage that you can do. It's essentially taking the Chronomancer and the Mirage and even the core Mesmer, which was a little bit, we'll say, complex or fast moving or required a lot of planning, and essentially is just nullified all that and made it just very straightforward. Now, there was some debate and I was debating myself as far as what the best, easiest elite specialization was for the Elementalist. And it really came down, obviously Weaver was out, but it came down between the Tempest and the Catalyst. And honestly, I lean towards the Catalyst in this comparison. And the reason being is that the Catalyst offers a lot more defenses and, we'll say, personal control, versus where the Tempest, which does in fact not only have its own regeneration, it has healing, it has a whole bunch of its good effects. However, the Catalyst just has that almost built in. And then on top of that, they bring a ton of damage straight up front. Yes, the rotation can be a little bit hefty. You can have to hit a number of different, we'll say, swings and abilities in a consecutive order for it to be most effective. That is true. But the Catalyst really just has an overall tankiness to it. It has its own defenses built in. It has a bunch of crowd control. Not only that, it can stack up a whole bunch of conditions, as well as doing a ton of power damage. Not to mention a massive on-demand heal within its own weapon kit in the Water Attunement, especially using the hammer. There's just too much that the Catalyst, the Hammer Catalyst, really does that I don't know necessarily if the Tempest can do as effectively. And essentially, you could press the buttons, just spam the buttons, and you'll figure it out, and you're good to go. What do you think of my list? Do you agree? Tell me down in the comments section below. If you want to learn the least played professions in Guild Wars 2, the ones that nobody plays, click this video here. Stay caffeinated, folks.